Alright, hey everybody, welcome to Algorithmic Filmmaking Week 1. Today will be a little bit of a mixed bag as we sort of talk a little bit about the class and then dive into our first couple exercises. I'm really excited to have you here. My cat is already excited to have you here. You'll get used to this sound, I assume, over the next couple weeks. But yeah, thank you for joining. I think we have something like 60 plus people already signed up for the class, which I think will make the Slack channel interesting, but is also just going to have a really wide array of people trying stuff out, which I'm really excited about. So let's start with just talking a little bit about the class and just sort of how I want people to treat each other, that sort of thing. So I have never had to enforce this code of conduct, and I hope I never have to. But just before we start, I want to talk a little about just we will be in a classroom, even though we won't see each other. There are methods of communication, so I want to make sure that we're all respectful of that. So first off, with a class like this especially, everyone's coming in with different skills. So I know there's some people who have programming backgrounds, some people who have film backgrounds, some people who are creators, that sort of thing. So everyone's coming in with different skills, and that's kind of awesome. That's why I'm teaching this class, because I think it's really great to have people with diverse skills come together and try and figure things out together. So with that in mind, if you are a programmer and people ask for help with code, please don't make fun of them. Actually give them help, or just ignore them and I can help them. Likewise, if you have a big background in film, film theory, that sort of thing, and people ask questions that you might find kind of simplistic, be aware that they're just starting in their journey. So above all else, please be respectful of our communication channels. So this isn't a live class. There's no Zoom channel. We don't really see each other, but we do have Slack, other things. So please just be respectful of those. Again, I've never had to do anything about this, but please don't harass people by DMing them. Please don't make fun of people in our actual Slack channels. Often people are like, oh, I don't want to post too much in our Slack channel. Posting too much is fine. If you really go overboard, I might mention something like, hey, let's DM on the sides or whatever. But the main thing is just please don't be disrespectful of other people. This is, again, your one and only warning. If this does happen, it happens to you, if someone's DMing you, I obviously can't see DMs over Slack, that sort of thing. Please let me know. I'm happy to sort of talk to that person depending on what you want to do. And if there are other things that if you think it's inappropriate, we can obviously talk about that. I will gladly issue refunds if there are issues. Just please reach out to me. I'm happy to sort of figure that out. And if for whatever reason, I hope this doesn't happen, but if you think I'm the one creating issues, please email me. I will, again, issue refunds without question. This last bullet's actually really important, especially in the context of this class. So in the past, when I've had people do stuff with video data sets or just data sets in general, I've had some folks say, I want to work with pornography, or I want to work with explicit photos from certain communities, et cetera, et cetera. This is not about wanting to stifle anyone's creativity or censor anyone. It's just say that certain people sign up for this class with different expectations of what they're going to see. So what I would say is, if you are going to post, let's call it challenging video material, sexual, violent, etc., just please flag it in the Slack channel. Again, I think we're all adults here. We can all choose what we want to watch. But I would prefer that people at least acknowledge, hey, there's a lot of sexual nudity in this piece. Just be aware of that. And then people can choose to watch it or not. If you have any questions about what that means, certainly DM me and ask. Again, this is not about saying, hey, you can't show this type of material. There probably is some line, let's not do child abuse material, that sort of thing. I think that's pretty obvious. Or at least there's probably a way to do that in a sensitive way, but it's much rarer. So let's talk about what that might be before actually posting it. Also, I don't want my Slack channel to get taken down. So, if you have any questions about this, please reach out to me beforehand, before sharing it. I'm not going to kick people out of class for making a mistake here, but if I feel like you're purposely trying to rile up people, you and I might need to have a chat. Again, never happened before, and actually, I would say, in most cases, people have come to me and said, hey, is it okay if I post this? They're very aware that it is sensitive material, and they want to be a good community steward, so I really appreciate that. So with that in mind, just say, please just be aware of what you're posting, and try and, be somewhat cognizant of trigger warnings, that sort of thing. We do have a Slack channel. Everyone should have received an invitation to the Slack channel. If you haven't, please let me know. You can email me. It's a private channel, so it's only people who are taking this class. So if you are not included in it, I have to sort of manually add you. So if you're not in it yet at this point, like when you're actually watching these videos, because I'm going to release them on Monday, if you're not in that channel and you want to be, like, please just either email me or DM me with your Slack handle and I can get you added. This should be a safe space for us, a class, just to explore things. It might get a little unwieldy. I've never worked with a class of 60 plus people, but we'll see how it goes. And we might be making updates as we go through to sort of like enforce threads and that sort of thing. But there is a thread where you should introduce yourself. Please do. Please just say hello, your name, what sort of pronouns you prefer to be used with you, and maybe a little bit about yourself and your work. Because I think that'll just be helpful for everyone to see and sort of see who else in the class. And one of the things I hear a lot from people is that this is something that they want to do to build a community. And with the async class, it's a little trickier because you guys don't necessarily talk. But if you do find someone who has similar interests to you, like, please, again, like, chat about it, like, talk about what your interests are and that sort of thing. Because I would love to see people work together in the future. I'll talk a little bit about me now. Usually I don't like to go too deep into my work, but I think for this class it's helpful to sort of understand where I'm coming from, so you can sort of see my work and how I'm approaching the class, because it's very much based on some projects I've done in the past. So I've kind of always been into film. I think even in college I was attending like the college film group when we were watching films by like Buñuel and David Lynch and that sort of thing. And this is a kind of embarrassing project I made like maybe my senior year that was sort of about a film called The Conversation, and sort of creating like a trailer kind of thing for it, motion graphic style. But I would say I've always sort of been interested in film and sort of the structures of it and how we can begin to play with it, and seeing more experimental film of that sort of nature. But I did take some time off. I really thought I was going to go into like motion graphics, move out to LA, do that sort of thing. And then I saw how many hours motion graphics artists were working at the time, and sort of decided that wasn't for me. But I've always sort of had an interesting background or an excitement about film as a whole. And I do a lot of short video clips. So you'll see this is a piece I did a number of years ago that was more about processing and creating looping video and that sort of thing. So a lot of my background is in sort of these smaller, I wouldn't even call it motion graphics, just like more like video art kind of pieces. And then, of course, AI came around. So when machine learning came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I got really, really into that. And I think one of the really fascinating parts of machine learning is that it generates video that can loop very easily, and you can do different processes with it that feel a little bit different than, like, say, After Effects or other processes. And I got really, really into that. And I think that sort of brought me back to, like, thinking about film. I'd seen the work of, like, Stan Brakhage and other folks and was sort of very aware of, like, experimental film, but hadn't really, like, studied it. And then during the pandemic, I was like kind of like teaching classes and was like, there's something here about video, but I want to understand more. So I started to get really into like experimental film and sort of do more studies and read books on the material, and kind of realized that like I think there's a good overlap between video art, these new processes, and potential for experimental filmmaking. So in maybe 2021, I released like a very early film, or like maybe one of the first things I really saw as like a film piece that I made. It's called Looking for You. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit just so you can sort of see the fun parts of it. It takes a data set of dance videos from the 90s, MTV Music. There was a big group in, I think, Detroit that was also doing like public access TV or public TV that had dance shows. And this sort of mashes them all up as like a big dance video. And it uses a tool called OpenPose, which we'll look at in this class, to actually be able to find frames and images that sort of are similar to each other. So one of the cool things about this class we'll get into more is like these tools are really great at finding similarities between diverse video clips and making connections between them. So this was sort of a piece I began to start thinking about. I think that there's a number, like probably like 100, 150 different videos combined into this piece. Probably more actually, but this is a great example of sort of the thing you can do with machine learning that would be very, very hard to do as an individual. And sorry for the flashing. I should have warned people ahead of time. A lot of my videos include strobing effects and that sort of thing, so I apologize if that caught you off guard. This is another thing. So again, this is sort of similarly the idea between Looking for You, but extending it into a big data set where you don't even necessarily see what actually is guiding these videos. So this is a piece of a Tai Chi dancer that has then been turned into just those shapes or the outlines of the body. and then I go through like some like 20 or 30 Marvel films to sort of create the same body movement. And again, we'll look at some of this stuff in the next couple weeks about how to do this, the type of data you would need for that, that sort of thing. But again, this takes on a lot more of the sort of experimental film world of like flashing imagery, the flicker effect, that sort of thing. And lastly, in October of last year, I did a project called Scream Scenes, which was myself and a friend built a data set from about 80 horror films. And then every day I did a different process of using that data set. So in this case, this is again OpenPose, but it sort of does a match cutting thing where it tries to find the last frame from one clip to the first frame of the next clip, and it tries to find the most common or the most similar, and then it creates a sort of endless loop of these sort of connections. So we'll definitely look at something like this in this class because this is exactly what I want to talk about. I did record a video that describes all 31 days, 30 days in October, 31, I don't know. I think it's 31. That describes every single day and the process for it. That's linked to from the syllabus, so you can go ahead and watch that. So this is sort of the impetus for the class. We won't be covering everything that's in this, and we will be covering some new stuff as well. But I would definitely recommend take a look at that short video of me explaining each process, jot some notes down and be like, I really want to see how to do this or how to do that. And we'll cover a lot of that material in this class. But this was really helping me realize, like, oh, when you have a video data set, there's so many different things you can do with that data set. What's the right process? Or like, you know, I had never seen anyone bring together all the tools from this material to be able to say, like, here are all the different ways in which you can apply these different tools and technologies to your video. So I was really excited to teach this and just sort of like cover these materials. So this is a lot of what we'll do in this class. Again, I'll be working with a found video data set. We'll talk about that a little bit more later in the class, but in most cases, I think you'll probably be working with found data. You might have your own videos. Sorry, gonna hold the cat while she screams. She always finds ways to do this when I'm recording. But, you know, this is going to be the basis of what we'll be doing. And obviously we don't need to do horror films for everything, but it'll be interesting to sort of see what everyone decides to work on with this material. Okay, so with that, let's talk a little bit about what the class is going to be like. So I say this before everyone in my classes, but this is especially true with this class. This class is definitely an experiment. So I'm actually teaching this class at ITP in the spring. That's an NYU program. So many of you may be aware of it because it's one of the sort of experimental media art schools, better known ones. So this is more or less like you guys are my guinea pigs for this first class, because that class will also be 7 weeks. I want to see what we can get done in 7 weeks. I might have like eyes are bigger than my stomach kind of issue with this class, but we'll see. This class will be fully async. So there will be no live videos. As you know, you might have seen that there was a Zoom link linked to from the purchase site on my web store. That was just because I have to have a link for the web store. But that Zoom link will probably not be used. I mean, I might use it if we want to do like a one-on-one or that sort of thing. But everything will be recorded. So the recording you get all the other recordings you see this week will be the same thing every week. I will probably try to keep it to within 2.5 hours per week, because I know anything more than that is a lot, but we'll sort of see where it goes. I expect there to be a lot of questions, and like my biggest concern, just to be blunt, about an async class is like how to make sure that everyone feels like they're actually getting the info they need. If they're stuck somewhere, how do they help them? So we'll kind of explore. This will probably be a little bit of a test to sort of see what happens. If I get a lot of questions in the Slack channel every week, I might decide to do something like a Q&A, like I'll record answers and then I'll post them all as a big group to answer sort of thing. I don't know, we'll see. I also expect that every week there will probably be addendums to the previous week's material. So I expect that like I'll go through some things and someone will be like, can you go a little bit deeper into this, or can you explain this more? I will likely need to add updates to that. So again, the syllabus that's linked to that Google Drive doc will probably contain a lot of that and maybe updates for the week, that sort of thing. So just be aware of that. This is the first time I'm really teaching this material. I kind of think I have an idea of how to like approach it, but I expect we'll need to make some iterations as we go through the class. So bear with me. The other good thing is like, you know, this is really a class for you. So if you also are not getting material you expected to, like, please let me know and I'm happy to cover that and maybe we end up with like 3 hours of material a week. I'm trying to also structure stuff by what's required and what's optional, so that if you are not a programmer or not a coder, like you can skip the coding stuff and just focus more on the theoretical stuff and just play with the tools that I built for you. There will be new videos every Monday, fingers crossed. I'm also having them transcripts made for them. So for anyone who has issues with hearing, maybe you're not a native English speaker and transcripts work better for you, transcripts will also come with those. The downside of that is that I need to have videos produced a couple days in advance so the transcripts can happen. It may happen that the videos get released Monday and then the transcripts come out on Tuesday. I'm going to kind of see how it goes. But I will do my best to try to release everything on Monday for everyone. Videos will be a mix of lectures and tutorials. Today is going to be a little bit more lecture heavy, but there are some tutorials as well. I will also, as I mentioned, include optional videos. So I will try to, in the syllabus, break out which I think are more optional and what I think are really required. I would say the lectures for every week are probably required because it helps you sort of get a context for what we're doing each week. But the tutorials, you can pick and choose. Be like, I'm not really into what we're doing this week, and I've got a very busy week, so let me skip out on that. Totally fine. We'll talk a little bit about recommendations for approaching this class in a minute, but I would just say, technically everything's optional. You're not getting a grade in this class, so do what you want to do. The Google Doc is linked to here. That is also linked in the Slack channel, and it's also the one that I emailed everyone. That doc will contain everything you need for this class. So if you're like, I am not a Slack person, I don't really want to engage with the team, I just want to get all the tutorials and all the material, that Google Doc is sort of your holy grail of everything you want. And in fact, at the end of the class, 7 weeks from now or 8 weeks from now or whatever, I will email everyone and say, this Google Doc is finished. It is sort of locked in. It will not change. Go ahead and watch that. Or go ahead and follow through that. Because I know some people also said, hey, I can't really stay up to schedule. Is it cool if I, sign up for the class, but then, maybe, in October, I'm actually going to dig into it more and get feedback on that sort of thing. Totally fine. Lastly is our Slack channel. I expect our Slack channel to be fairly busy for the first couple weeks, but I also don't know everyone's schedules, so we'll sort of see how that goes. Again, 60 people is a lot for a class. I'm kind of doing this as an experiment to sort of see how it goes, but we may need to create some Slack norms just to thread stuff and that sort of thing, so we'll see how it goes. Lastly, if you do want to DM me, I prefer DMs on Slack over email. I am not the most email proficient person, and Slack is something I'm already in day to day for work and that sort of thing. So I prefer that. My handle is @Derek. You'll see me in our Slack channel, but you can always DM me if you have questions or that sort of thing. I'm also going to work out some schedule where maybe there's time for people to one-on-one toward the end of class as people begin to work on their projects. I'll probably make more announcements about that as I sort of see how the class is going and see how much engagement we get. Obviously, me trying to meet with 60 people every week would not be feasible, but there may be time where we can structure that out to sort of work for everyone, where everyone gets a couple sessions with me, that sort of thing. We'll see how this goes. Again, very experimental. We'll kind of figure it out as we go. Here is, as of today, what I think the course structure will look like. This is very much open to interpretation and change and that sort of thing. But I think it will probably be about right for us. So today we're going to talk about making a data set. We'll talk about where to find videos, how to turn them into clips, that sort of thing. Next week we'll look at visual analysis tools, so color, length of time, a lot of sort of non-content in the video content analysis. Following week we'll actually look at content in the video itself and how to describe that. Week 4 we'll look at what I've called open pose, which is really body detection stuff, that sort of thing. Week 5, we'll look at text analysis and sequencing. Week 6, a common thing I hear from people is audio reactive, rhythms, that sort of thing, so we'll look at that. And then just knowing that, I have a lot of ideas for these things, there might be some overflow. Also, I'd like to leave that last week open because usually during class I hear, half the class is really excited about a certain thing that I wasn't going to cover, and now maybe we will cover it, that sort of thing. So we'll sort of see how that goes. One note I want to make about this class, because I have had a couple people ask me, this will not be as much about generating video as it is analyzing video that already exists. So you may have seen that I do a lot of text-to-video stuff today using machine learning. That will probably not be covered in this class or be covered very loosely. But if people do want particularly tutorials around that, I do have some already set up, and I'm happy to share those. And maybe, maybe either do that in week 7 or maybe even make a week 8 and just sort of like add that as an addendum for the class. But I've tried to make it clear that like we're not necessarily doing a lot on generating video and more about analyzing existing video, although you could use generate video for those pieces. The last thing is I would love to do a show and tell. I think there's 60 people in the class, and I think there's lots of people with great ideas who are already coming up with projects in mind. And in my previous class, we've done a show and tell as well. Usually that's about a month out from the end of the class. So I think that would put us in like end of October, early November. It's just a great way for people to sort of like have a end project in mind. I think it's like one of those things where like you can take this class and like be like, oh, this is cool, but like I don't really have any idea what I want to do with it. And then a year from now, you're like, I didn't really get anything out of that class because I never really finished a project. So I like to do a show and tell as like a pick a project and like try to finish it, and I can help you. Pick a project of a decent, of like a scale that's achievable based on your schedule, that sort of thing. So we'll look at a show and tell, and like I'll probably follow up with like dates and that sort of thing. I think for this class, it would probably make sense for people to do recordings and send them to me, and then I can put them all together and like do a show and tell package over YouTube. Again, we'll sort of figure this out as we go. First time I'm doing this, so we'll figure it out. But I just want to encourage people to start thinking about a project that they can start like gearing toward. The other thing I would love for us to think about is actually having a class video set. So I've built a folder where you can then upload your own video data set. I think there's definitely some stuff toward the end of the class that I would love to sort of have like a huge data set of video that I think would be fun to play with everyone's materials. I know some people are like, I just want to have my own video data set that I'm not sharing with anyone. Totally fine. If you do want to contribute to this video data set as a class, it's here. We'll talk about how to actually do that over the next couple weeks, because we're going to build up our videos and then like have a text file that manages all of the data that we're sourcing from them. So we'll play with this in a little bit, and maybe I'll talk about this when we talk about homework tonight. But I think it'll be a fun thing. It might also give people access to more data than they're used to like producing, or they can produce on their own. We'll sort of see how it goes. My recommendations for this class are every week we have exercises. And every week you might decide like, oh, I've got 10,000 video clips that I want to run this exercise on. And you'll start to do that, and you'll realize that it's going to take 3 days to process that entire video data set. So always, always, always start with like a smaller data set. Maybe you've got a 2-minute long trailer that you've cut all the clips out for. We'll talk about that today. And then you've got a full feature-length film, or like 5 films that you've got as your longer video data set. Start with a smaller one, because you're going to learn a lot faster by processing that data in an hour or two versus trying to process everything all at once, and then something breaks, you try it again, and now you're losing days as you go through these things. So always start with a small data set. I'll build one today, but start with that and then expand from there. So again, you might also find that like, oh, this actually wasn't really helpful for what I'm planning to do. The exercise was fun, but I don't really need to run this process on my entire video data set, which is going to take 3 days or whatever. I would recommend you start thinking about a project now, just because even if you want to take that full month after class is over to build a project, you don't necessarily want to wait till then to start thinking about what you're going to make. You might need to source a lot of data. You might need to start thinking about, how to actually approach the project, that sort of thing. That Scream Scenes video, what I'm calling director's commentary, I would definitely recommend you check that out, because I think there's a lot of ideas there, and I could certainly today tell you how to do those things. In fact, I have probably scripts or whatever to help you build those things. So if you do see something in there that's really exciting for you, let's talk about it. But there'll be new stuff coming up as well. So start like in the back of your mind, if you don't already have a project like that you want to work on, maybe start thinking about like where you would want to think about for content. Lastly, as we look at some videos today, I think there is like, what makes art in these cases is more of a conceptual approach. Just pulling together a bunch of clips and randomly sequencing them is fun, but like it's not necessarily like artistic, or like doesn't have an artistic merit that like maybe a critic would approach. I think those are great things for final projects, but don't try to like force that into all these exercises. These exercises are to get used to and get comfortable with the tools and the technology, not necessarily to immediately make your thesis piece or whatever, if that's how we want to approach it. So start by just learning the tools. Like again, upload a stupid video, turn it into clips, and then process over that. But as you begin to think about maybe a project you want to release out into the world, then you might want to approach things more conceptually, spend a little more time building your data set, that sort of thing. So just think about that, because it is, again, it's sort of like, I often find that people are like, oh, I didn't start the exercise because I need to build the right data set and that's going to take me a month. And it's like, well, if you're going to take a month to build a data set, then you're going to lose 4 weeks of class. So start with something simple, start with something easy, and then build from there. There is quote unquote homework for this class. Again, you don't get a grade out of this thing, so it's sort of up to you. I personally find that the best way to learn is to attempt every exercise yourself, fail, ask questions, send me screenshots, send me error messages, like, DM me, like, I couldn't figure out how to make this work, like, what's going on? Is something wrong with my video? Is something wrong with the tool? Like, whatever. But it's always good to try the exercises. The exercises I've set up should maybe take you at most like half an hour. Today's is probably actually the most intensive, just because you need to find some videos to use. But it's probably a couple hours a week would be my hope. So you got 2 hours for lectures and watching videos here. If you can follow me at a really fast pace, I know I talk fast, but if you can follow me at a fast pace, you could probably do it in an hour, hour and a half. But then run the exercises, because I think that's actually how you're going to learn, or how you're going to see what actually happens with these tools. So that'll be the most helpful thing. And if you do have a project in mind that you want to start shooting for, maybe you're not sure I'm going to cover any of the material, like, just DM me. Hit me up and be like, I have an idea for this. This is why I took the class. Are we going to cover anything like that? Other things I can watch, or like other ideas I can start to think through. Happy to respond to those when I can. I also want to talk a little bit about coding, because I know a lot of people reach out to me to say like, oh, do I need to know how to write code? Like that sort of thing in this class. All the code for the exercises that we are going to run will be available to you without needing to know any code. We'll look at this when we do the intro to Colab, but Colab has like a very lightweight GUI. At most you'll need to learn how to set a variable, like set a path, or basically copy and paste a path, or, change a couple values in a tool. And I'll talk through those. So for the most part, you don't need any coding experience. Being comfortable seeing error messages and not worrying about that, or like knowing like, oh, I just need to like message this to Derek to see if anyone else is getting these errors, that sort of thing. That's probably the basics, or like the highest level we need for this. I know there are some programmers in here who probably are interested in like more of the back end of these tools and how they work and that sort of thing. This is not a machine learning class, so I won't cover like how to actually like write machine learning code, that sort of thing. But if people are interested in a little bit more of a deeper dive into some of these tools, how to, write FFmpeg, commands, that sort of thing, I'm happy to talk about that, but that'll be included more as optional and supplemental materials. That won't be the emphasis of this class, but I do know there are some programmers in here who are probably interested in that, and I'll do the best I can to sort of provide you with what you need to sort of learn those things. Okay, so let's talk a little bit why algorithmic filmmaking, like why did I decide to make this course, and why did you decide to sign up for it? Maybe different reasons, we'll find out. For me, I mentioned like that Scream Scenes project was really eye-opening to me. I was like, oh man, there's like so much I could do. Like, I did it for 31 days, but I probably could have done it for at least another 15 or even more if I had more time. And I think that's what's really fascinating about where we are today in terms of technology, in terms of conceptual approaches to video art, or just, mashing up video clips, that sort of thing. The funny thing is, like, some people are like, oh, well, that's such a new medium, like, what are you doing? But I think realistically, like, since the beginning of filmmaking, since film became a thing in the, like, late 19th century, 1890s, whatever, like, when film started to become a thing, creators have always used editing as a way to tell stories. And really a lot of what we're doing in this class will be about editing. It'll be about how do you combine sequences together to tell a story. Whether it's like a narrative story or a non-narrative story, it doesn't really matter. It's about sort of like combining clips in new ways. And that's really all editing is in many ways too. And I think, if you've never seen George Méliès's work, he was sort of one of the earliest people to sort of like do really interesting things with video or with film, where he would, quite honestly, like be able to make cuts in videos. And I don't even know, I just produced this. I don't know if this is actually the right thing where it's going to be, where we're going to show cuts, but he was sort of I don't know if he was the first one, but he was one of the proponents of trick films, which were where, it's probably what you've seen before. Like you enter in a cut somewhere and someone disappears. And that's different from like performing magic on screen. It's more like, a cut in a film where the rest of the sequence stays the same, but one thing changes, feels magical, right? It's like, oh my God, that person just disappeared from the screen. Clearly I chose a sample that does not necessarily have the best example of this. But, I think these are great examples, and if you've never seen his work, I'd highly, highly recommend checking this out. This is one of his more famous pieces, A Trip to the Moon. But there's a lot of other works. I think he's got some more that are less science fiction and more like, I don't know, like occult kind of things, and those tend to have like more magic sequences in them. But again, from the very beginning, I mean, Méliès is one of the first people to really work with this material, and this is a great example, I guess. Maybe not of like of props being used to sort of create animation, that sort of thing. It's less editing, but it's more like practical effects, that sort of thing. For other filmmakers, especially experimental filmmakers starting in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of these filmmakers were often cash strapped. Like experimental film has never really been a big money maker compared to like the Hollywood scene. And often a lot of these, poor and broke experimental filmmakers would use found footage as a way to make films, but like not be able to shoot their own stuff. And I would say like another common theme of that was basically to be like sort of a fuck you to the establishment, right? To like say like, we don't need to be Hollywood to make films that are interesting, that are exciting, that challenge people, that sort of thing. And again, I think that's a really important part of algorithmic filmmaking too, is like thinking about like, if I can source from Hollywood movies to say something that is, controversial or just challenging to norms, I think there's a value to that work in artistic merit. Soda Jerk is a very common, or not very common, but they're still like a very prolific team that produce material. This is probably better listened to with sound. Again, all these videos are linked to from our syllabus. You can also sit down and watch them. I mean, Hollywood Burn, I think, is like 60 minutes long. So if you're interested, you can watch it. We're not going to watch it together as a class. But this is a project called Hollywood Burn, which is sort of taking a lot of like famous movie scenes and re-editing them to talk a little about copyright laws, about who owns what, archaic law, who owns what material and how do they abuse that material or use it against other artists, that sort of thing. It's a really cool video. I highly recommend it. There's lots of really interesting and funny moments in it. I find them to be you'll see here, we've got Elvis in the middle of, some of their scene. I think it's just really cool and very funny, and I think they show how you can be very creative using materials that are not your own, right? This is essentially a video collage, that kind of thing. Another really common use of algorithmic filmmaking is a lot of filmmakers have used found footage as a way to turn a critical eye to Hollywood, mainstream, the very common white male gaze that we see in Western society, that have kept women and people of color in the minority. So one thing I'm particularly excited about to see in this class is how we can utilize video footage as a way to sort of fight the power, that sort of thing. And I've got a couple of examples here that I think are really great examples of sort of this material. Rafael Montañez Ortiz, I hope I pronounced that name right, I'm not really sure I did, made this in 1958. So when people say like, oh, this is such a new thing, it's really not. In 1958, he made the cowboy and quote Indian film. He's a Chicano artist who has done a lot of different stuff with material and talking about, how, people of color are shown in especially Western films, right? So this was a film. It's one single film, and what Raphael did is he actually cut it up with the tomahawk. So he took the film, he slammed the tomahawk against it, cutting it up, and then he stuck it in a medicine bag and pulled out the pieces randomly as sort of a spiritual process, and then re-edited the film based on that. So you'll see like sometimes the film's upside down, sometimes it's right side up, and it's all out of sequence. But you could still say like, again, the classic sort of cowboy and Indian, where the Indians are the bad guys, cowboys are the good people. It's maybe a little bit flipped on its head, or like it's just questioned here in this process. So I think this is an amazing example. Like we will this week literally do something similar by randomly chopping up a video and putting it back together. And I think like this, again, when I talk about conceptual ideas, I think this is a really, really great example of like a conceptual idea where the process is, fairly easy to do. We will replicate it this week, but the concept actually is what makes it, right? It is a Chicano artist opposing the white male narrative of the white settler being the protagonist of films, and flipping that on its head. So here's another piece sort of in a similar vein. This is Copper Gilloth's Modeling the Female Body, a survey of computer-generated women 1980 to 1993. So maybe similar to the previous piece, this is taking a bunch of clips from the SIGGRAPH shows. SIGGRAPH is still today a big CGI sort of like computer video demo kind of thing. And you'll see here what Copper did is she went through the archive of videos and pulled out all of the examples of women being displayed. And as you can guess, they are very sexualized. They are very based on norms of women. And it's kind of funny to look at this today and also look at what is popular within a certain crowd of AI art, where it is lots of women with big breasts, that sort of thing. And realizing that like even 40, 50 years later, we're still stuck with computer demos still sexualizing women or still enhancing certain, encouraging certain values about women. And again, I think this is really great because this was more or less in real time. Copper went back through 15 years of archives, but it was still very current, and she put it together, and I think she even asked all the SIGGRAPH people to respond to be like, why did you choose to make women look like this in this piece? And I think a lot of people chose not to respond. But I think it's a very fascinating look, especially at technology and how technology, despite trying to change certain things, just reinforces other things as a part of it. So I thought this is a really interesting piece and one that's certainly worth thinking about in your own work today. Naomi Uman is maybe sort of similar like to Copper's work, where this is called Removed. Again, this is probably like one of the more famous found footage pieces when people talk about found footage. Naomi went and found a bunch of pornography films and then went in and bleached out the women. This is actually a process of bleaching, removing the women from the scene. So just men sort of like sexually stroking, I don't know, ghosts or nothing even almost in many ways. And, you know, sort of doing like, again, it's looking at like how women are portrayed in media, especially pornography. And again, this is sort of where I talk about like the fact that like, look, I recognize that people are going to want to do stuff like this in their class. And obviously I don't think you see anything sexual here. You could maybe kind of make out some very like barely tinted breasts or vaginas or things, but like this is a really, you know, powerful and still very modern take on film. This was made in 1999. Still very true 25 years later that we still have like an objectification problem with women and with people non-binary, like that sort of thing. So, but again, this is a really interesting project where they're just going and finding material. Not encouraging anyone to go look at a bunch of porn websites and like download those as data sets, but if that's something you're interested in or something that's a part of your art practice already, like by all means, please go for it. And again, like, you know, just please flag that for people in case it's not something they want to look at. But I think it's a really fascinating and potentially interesting use of this medium. I think there's just a ton of opportunities to explore these things, and there's more and more video produced every day that could be critically viewed by artists. I'll say in the past 25 years, we've seen this field of sort of what we're called cultural analytics, or, you know, just looking at cultural data. So cultural creations could be sound, it could be image, it could be video. And because of the internet and because of, you know, just technology in general, we're seeing a more and more, like, I think it's something like every year we see like more and more data produced. I think it's something like the amount of video uploaded to YouTube is more than could actually be produced by a single human in a day, like, or whatever, like just so much video. And we start to need tools to start to think about looking at all those pieces as a whole at a scale. I would say like one of the most like popular people or one of the more interesting people who've been doing this for years is Lev Manovich. I think he used to run a program at UC San Diego or somewhere like that. But in 2004, he made this project called Soft Cinema, which I think is really interesting because we'll talk about this again a little bit later today. But Soft Cinema was a collection of data, which he then ran processes over in order to sort of make a collection. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes. I don't know how long it's going to take to load. Should have tried this before. Sorry. This is, you can again watch this video, but you'll sort of see some different pieces from this. But it's produced more like a grid. It's like a grid of different video images, and there are connections here. This came out as a DVD, and the DVD was meant to always change up the editing structure and always change up sort of like the order of appearance and that sort of thing, which again, I think is really fascinating and certainly a thing we could explore in this class because, you know, we're not necessarily going to look at interactive video tools, but we certainly could. or you certainly, if that's something that's a part of your practice, you could begin to explore that as well. So there's an opportunity here to think about, either random connections or even connections that make more sense, either visually or textually or whatever, to begin to put together like stories and narratives and begin to look at things as a whole. And to me, that's what's really interesting about this class is like the amount of data you might need is actually quite large to achieve certain things. So in my case, I've gone and done stuff with like 80 full-length films or 100 full-length films. If you have the tooling or the processes or the know-how, you could do thousands of films. You could do 10,000s of films. And then it's really about processing power. But you do have the ability to generalize or look at things at a scale that maybe you used to not be able to do because of technology. And again, I think this is leveraging a tool and a technology for interesting insights or criticisms or whatever it is, rather than just trying to wait for, a single film to sort of tell the story you want to tell. So overall, goals for this course. I would love to have everyone sort of understand the basics of what make up a movie. There are probably some people in here who are much better at film theory than I am. I am not a film theorist. I didn't go to film school or that sort of thing. But we'll talk on a very basic level about what makes up a movie. And using a lot of the tools, we'll actually pull apart those individual pieces to think about how we might assess, I don't know, maybe just sound, or maybe just visuals, or maybe just individual frames. And then use that to reconstruct a collection of clips into a new film. And again, my purposes might be analysis or criticism or artistic license, or maybe just have fun. I think that Soda Jerk stuff, while there is a theory and a concept behind it, I think it's just fun to watch. It's kind of interesting. And I think that's totally valid for this class. But a lot of it is just to understand the tools, right? I think a lot of people took this class because they're I'm just interested in all these new tools that are coming out. Every day there's a new machine learning tool that comes out that could be applied to these things. But in a lot of cases, it isn't, because the technology is hard to get set up. It's not easily accessible to filmmakers or video artists or whatever. And part of my hope for this class is just to make it more accessible for people. To be oh, I can do this process. And maybe it's a little bit slower because it's a slightly out-of-date tool, but it still works. So understanding these tools, and also understanding what these tools are good at, but also what they're bad at. If you've ever taken any of my machine learning classes, you'll know that a good part of these tools is actually understanding they're not very good, or they do some things well, but they do other things really poorly. So for example, one thing we're going to learn in this class is a lot of these tools are set up for video with people in them, right? So if you are an abstract filmmaker, you might struggle with some of these tools because these tools are not set up to define what is this abstract image? How do you describe what paint on a cell of film looks like? How do you describe that? How do you edit that? It's a very challenging process for all of these tools. So if you are an abstract filmmaker, we'll still work with you. We'll figure out how to make some of these tools work. But I might also recommend that what you do is you start with, again, a movie trailer or something that you can at least understand the tools and then figure out what they do well and what they don't. So just be aware of that. It's kind of a challenge, kind of annoying. But there's a lot of cases of this where oh, this thing is really good at this, but it really sucks for the material I'm working on. How do I make that work, or how do I explore that even more? Sometimes it's just maybe I just lean into it and just sort of show how bad it is. I think part of this class and part of my work is also about criticizing machine learning too. If we want to criticize what is happening in modern filmmaking, we should also criticize what is happening in modern computation, because it's all kind of coming from the same monoculture, or it's all coming from the same, especially here in the US, the whole Western sort of idea of technology and utopian and related to capitalism, that sort of thing. Everyone drink, I use the word capitalism. So yeah, lots of different options here, but I think what's really cool is just thinking about the tools. I don't want to turn this class into fully just about tutorials. I want there to be a basis in concepts, but I'll admit, a lot of what we're going to do is explore some new tools and see what works and see what doesn't. Okay, tools for this class. So I hope that there's very little that we need to pay for in this class. But there are a couple of things you will need to pay for. Sorry, you will need to pay for them. First off is Google Colab. I will record an entire different video about an intro to Google Colab. I know many of you who have taken my previous classes know how to use Colab. I will keep it at a very high level for this group because we're not going to look at code a lot. We're just going to use these as tools. I'll talk about why we need to use Colab in the future, but essentially there are two plans for Colab. There is one called Pro and there's one called Pro Plus. Pro is $10 US a month. Pro Plus is $50 US dollars a month. And I'll explain those in that video about which one you might want. I would say if you're only going to run through the exercise in this class, Pro is probably fine. If you have an idea that you want to do a big, large-scale project on your own, either as part of this class or after this class, I would recommend Pro Plus. Basically, the price gets you more credits for different machines, that sort of thing. Next, you'll probably need to use Google Drive. I highly recommend Google Drive over like Dropbox or other things just because of its integration with Colab. But because we're working with video data tends to be very large and tends to be very like high in terms of file size. So I recommend a Google Drive account with a decent amount of space. If you've got like 10 gigabytes of use right now, then you need 500 total would probably be about the right range. I generally work with terabytes of Google Drive data, but that's sort of it. And then the other thing we need some actual video. So I'll talk about this in just a second. It could be your own video. It could be video you find on the internet. I don't really care, but you will need video data for this class. Optional tools, I will cover some stuff that you can do in Resolve. Actually, this week I'll cover some stuff you can do in Resolve. Maybe you're an Adobe Premiere person. Maybe you use After Effects or other like Final Cut, that sort of thing. I'm going to try to keep away from any additional paid tools beyond what's here, but I might mention some things like, hey, you can sign up for this. It's $20 a month. It's up to you. I probably won't dig into those tools that much, but there are a lot of tools every day coming out that try new things. So just be aware of that. I will try to keep this on the cheaper side because I know a lot of us are already paying for lots of stuff and don't need more tools to pay for. Okay, so the whole point of this class is we're going to make a video data set, and then we're going to do a bunch of different operations on that video data set. So you're probably asking, how do I go and find video? So here are a couple options. Obviously, you can shoot your own. Fully welcome that. Like, it's definitely not the easiest thing to do. Shoot stuff on your iPhone, shoot stuff on a camera you have, whatever. That is definitely like going to be one of the more interesting ways to operate on these videos. Maybe you shot like a 30-minute piece and you've got a bunch of footage and you want to start operating on that. Could work. Internet Archive has a bunch of sort of, I guess, like gray copyright video on their site. Maybe it's copyright free, maybe it's not, but it's a decent archive of work to download from. You've got stock video sites. It's going to be kind of expensive. There are very few that are free or subscription-based. Most of them charge per video. One that I tend to use a lot is, what's it called? Artgrid.io. I think it's got like a monthly subscription, but beyond that, it's all free. So you could download that and work off that. YouTube, Vimeo. Vimeo has download links on some of their videos, not on all of them. We'll look at a tool called YouTube DL, which allows you to download YouTube videos just using the URL of the YouTube video. I'll touch on copyright in a second, but certainly a thing. DVDs, Blu-rays. DVDs are fairly easy to scrape nowadays and pull video off of using a tool like Handbrake. Blu-rays are a little bit trickier, but it's certainly not impossible. It just depends on sort of how they're encrypted. And then there are other websites, torrenting sites, that sort of thing. I probably won't go in and explain every single illegal thing you can do for this class, but we're all adults. We all have Google. We can find out how to download certain things. So if there's a particular video you can't find, I'm sure you can find a way to get access to it. I will turn a blind eye to how we download those or find those videos. So let's talk a little bit about copyright ethics. So I posted that little intro video to this, and of course I had one or two people say like, oh, you're breaking copyright, you're stealing from artists, like how dare you? And I think I've already covered a little bit about why I think this is an interesting class and why I think it goes beyond just like stealing versus, critiquing or that sort of thing. For this class, I personally don't care about copyright. This is not a class where you need to dig into like the legal ramifications of copyright or the benefits, pros and cons. But for this class, I don't really care where you grab video from. I prefer you not steal it from your ex or whatever, but like, for the most part, I'm going to turn a blind eye to certain things. One thing I do recommend, and I'll post a video on my approach to copyright or my approach to using data, is I strongly advocate for punching up rather than punching down. So stuff like taking from Disney, totally fine. Stuff like taking from a small filmmaker of color when you're a white guy, definitely a little bit more of a gray area. And I would say, like, in general, you can try and ask for permission. Just say like, hey, I'm taking this class. I would love to work with your video data set. Is it okay if I download it? use it, whatever. Always asking for permission is probably a nice way to start, but I also recognize for this class, it's, not like we're going to like submit these videos to Cannes or anything, so do what you feel most comfortable with. If you are working on a project you want to release commercially, I would definitely consider getting permission. There are cases like Soda Jerk where I think they're doing such different work that I doubt they went and got permission on all those pieces. But, there's probably an argument, at least here in the US, for stuff like fair use, right? So parody laws, we do have some fair use laws, but, unfortunately, if you were to steal a bunch of stuff from Disney and Disney felt like you were infringing on their work, Disney has thousands upon thousands of lawyers that could sue you, and you will lose whether you are right or wrong just because they have more expensive lawyers than you. So, again, most commercial experimental stuff that's being released and put in festivals, no one's going to really bat an eyelash on, but, who knows. So in general, say, like, try to get permission for stuff if you can, but at the end of the day, like, for this class, I don't really care. And again, I think, like, the big thing is, like, critique is always going to be more popular than just stealing stuff and randomly, like, reusing it. I think when you can form a cogent analysis and critique of a body of work and point out, like, look at all of this Hollywood work that is using people of color in the wrong ways or portraying them in bad light, like, you have a much safer case to say, like, I'm doing this as a critique, and therefore it's fair use. So before we jump into the tutorials for this week, I want to talk a little bit about what makes up a film. Again, I didn't go to film school. I'm not a film critic or a film theorist. So those of you that are might cringe a little bit at this overview. I apologize. I want to just quickly touch on some of the basics of what makes up and builds up to a full-length film. In part because what we're going to look at is tools that help break apart each one of those pieces individually. There's no tool set that does everything all across an entire video data set, but there are individual tools that will look at individual pieces, and depending on what you're trying to achieve, you might find that certain tools are better for certain outcomes. So I assume all of us have seen films. I assume all of us sort of understand this. Maybe you've taken a film class or two. But again, like, I'm just going to give a very, very quick overview on sort of the ideas or concepts of what puts together a film. So first off, we've got a script, right? So scripts generally guide the structure of a film. That's not always true, but it's often true, at least in narrative work. It establishes scenes, dialogue, and often what the camera is going to see. So even experimental films are sort of guided by something that looks like a script. I might show some work from like Rose Lauder, or actually saw some of Stan Brackage's sort of notes on his films. I might share some of that in a later session. Even they're defined by a little bit of like a shot list or something. So in general, there is some guiding structure, and we'll talk a little about guiding structures as we get further into the class. But just know, like, a script for like a Hollywood or a narrative film is really about the structure. It may not be the end that you actually see when you see the final piece, but it is some sort of guidance when you're shooting pieces. Scenes. So scenes, most films, unless we're talking about like Rope or something, I don't know, like, are generally multiple scenes, right? They have multiple different locations. There are different actors in different scenes and different dialogue per scene. I think it's kind of important to think about this as like scenes are not always exactly like verbatim what you would see or what you would hear about in a film. So scenes are often discontinuous, right? There are very few films that are 90 minutes long and it is a 90-minute single shot, through one person's point of view. Often it jumps from location to location, time to time. They can often be out of sequence, linearly or non-linear, so scenes are not, they don't always add up to like the entire story. And I think that's important to think about as we begin to break apart our scenes in today's lesson. Scenes are also often broken up further into shots or clips. So there may be a scene that is a dialogue between two people at a kitchen table. And a shot might be, a single shot of one person talking across the table, and then you cut to the other shot of the other person talking back. So this is what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at actually breaking stuff into shots. But I think it's important to recognize that like scenes and shots are not the same thing in most cases. and also that shots are often discontinuous from dialogue, which we'll talk about in a minute. All this to say that like there's no one single like building block of video or of film that we can just capture and have it cover everything. So in the case of an example of someone having a conversation at a kitchen table, right? Like all those shots need to build up to a scene to actually make a coherent scene. But we're going to break it down into individual shots, and then it's a little bit harder for us to sort of like algorithmically figure out what a scene looks like. And this is where it gets a little bit trickier as we try to think about like what are our building blocks we're working with. And obviously there's a ton of theory on like the correct way to sequence shots, so you don't leave audiences confused, right? So there are ways in which you try to make sure that it looks like the person is looking at the other person. You don't want to break that. You know, the shot, reverse shot, like those sort of concepts. I don't know that we'll get into those in this class, but I think it's worth considering. Maybe I actually will, or maybe we'll think about that convention and how we could play with it. But again, there's a lot of theory on this, and I recommend do a quick Google on YouTube or like search on YouTube like shot reverse shot or shot theory. Like there's a ton of stuff in there about how that works. Probably a little bit outside the scope of this class because we only have 7 weeks. Frames. I think this one's actually really important to what we will do in this class, which is that regardless of the medium, whether it's video or whether it's actual film or whether it's something digital, the fundamental building block of imagery connecting to video is actually an individual frame. So that means, you'll hear this often as 24 frames per second, 60 frames per second, et cetera, et cetera. No film is actually continuous. Everything can be broken down into individual frames. And it's kind of this like cool thing that like by sequencing a bunch of frames that look very similar, our brain is tricked into believing that that is motion that is continuous. And experimental filmmakers love to play with that, as you've seen from my own work as well. So we'll actually see a lot of examples within like messing with frames and having that build up to a clip and having that build up to scenes. So we will definitely look at splitting video into frames. Probably not in this week, but probably starting next week. Because it's a very, very common thing we're going to need to do, especially to assess and analyze video. We will turn a bunch of frames or a bunch of clips and shots into individual frames and look at that sequence of frames one by one. Dialogue actually was like, I don't know if I'm going to cover dialogue, but I think we actually will probably look at some way to extract dialogue and then think about how that might or might not connect to what we're actually seeing visually. So I think this class will lean a little bit more visual, a little bit more video, and less on sort of text narratives. But I think we can actually play with that. Maybe we'll look at some tools that allow us to do that. So obviously dialogue is what's said by the actors, both in the scene or by something like a voiceover. And I think the important thing to think about here is like when we talk about analyzing shots don't always, at least the film, the visual version of a shot, does not always connect one-to-one with the dialogue, right? So I think a lot of, like spy movies or things, someone might be saying something, but then what you're visually seeing is something that is, different. So the dialogue might be meant to distract the characters within the narrative, but then the shot itself is actually like doing something different. And again, when we try to talk about analyzing content or the content of a video clip, that's where it gets tricky. Well, are we looking at the visual side of it? Are we looking at the dialogue side of it? Are we looking at that contextually, throughout the narrative, like that sort of thing? So it's going to get a little bit tricky as we go through this stuff. Soundtrack and score. I think these are also crucial things to think about because, you might not think about the soundtrack or the score as content within the piece of the film, but I actually think it's really important. Like I'm sure you've seen many things where people talk about how horror film scores, that stabbing sound, it really adds to the scene or the scariness of a scene. One of the pieces in the Scream scenes is actually taking the original Halloween and removing John Carpenter's score from it, and you just get the dialogue, and it feels way less scary because the way it's dubbed, it's almost funny to actually see it without the sound. So again, we might look at some of this. I think if anyone's interested in this, there's definitely some tools to explore around this. But it's important to think about like how all of this sort of like all these different layers of different things actually lead to the soul or the idea of the film. And score and soundtrack are really important parts of that. So the way this class is sort of structured is we'll try to look at each one of these pieces each week. And we probably won't cover them all. Like I think soundtrack might be the only thing we don't cover, although I could look at some stuff for that. But I think it's helpful to understand that all of these tools are more or less built to assess one of these layers, not all of the layers or even multiple layers. So for example, there are no video analysis tools that exist today that I know of that take in both dialogue and image. You would have to separate those two out and then try to reclaim them together at a later point. And that's kind of interesting, like to think about again, like machine learning tools are so, while they seem really powerful and really magical right now, they're actually really just meant to solve for individual layers of these types of films. So maybe they do scene analysis. Actually, they don't really do scene analysis, but you could add up a bunch of clips to do scene analysis. They're really meant to maybe even do just frames or just clips. So when we look at this in context of what the work we want to do, we may actually need to do some manual labor to get to the point where we have context for scenes or context for films. And this is kind of the tricky part of where we are today with the tools we have available to us. Okay, so let's talk about this week's homework. So this week's homework is to do what we call shot detection. And that is basically taking what I mentioned as the scenes or a piece of film or a piece of video or a trailer and breaking that down into individual clips or individual shots. And the reason we do that is I would say that well, we could go even further and break those down into frames. I would say the most sort of coherent building block is probably more of a shot. And it's a way, because we want motion in our final pieces, or maybe I assume we will probably want that. Shots give us that motion while also giving us unique chunks of material to work with that I think logically we can kind of see as the building block. And so it's important to remember that a feature-length film, this is actually some work I did with Scream Scenes, is I watched 80 horror films, and that would mark on a piece of paper or on a text file every scene that contained a scream, and then myself and a friend would go and actually edit those by hand. A feature-length film can contain thousands of cuts, especially the more modern the formulas, the more cuts there are, because now it's done digitally and people can go crazy. For this class, what we kind of want to do is that we actually want to break those down into every single shot per film or per whatever piece of material we're using. Doing that by hand would probably be all 7 weeks of this class. So I don't think we want to do it by hand. So this is where we're going to use what are called shot detection tools. And there are two I'm going to cover. So there'll be 2 tutorials. The first one will be on what's called PySceneDetect, which is a command line tool, which just means we're going to use Colab for it. And what that tool will allow us to do is it'll allow us to say, here's a video, go in and guess or determine the best places for a clip, and then it'll go in and enter those clips and turn them into individual video files. The other one we'll look at DaVinci Resolve, which has a built-in GUI tool that allows you a little bit more control and allows you a little bit more of actually going and looking at each one of these pieces. Both these are free. I will say I think PySceneDetect is easier to use because it's pretty much a bunch of plug and play. But if for whatever reason the videos you work with, you find that PySceneDetect isn't working well for them, and we'll look at that in a minute, then DaVinci Resolve might be a better tool for you. There are a bunch of other tools. I know Premiere has shot detection. I know other tools have shot detection. If you've done this before, this might be easier for you. If you've never done this before, I would probably recommend looking at these 2 tools and just starting there. So we want to build up what I would call a shot database. And what we'll do is once we actually convert our individual, let's say we go find a movie trailer, and we have the movie trailer, we use PySceneDetect to produce a bunch of individual shots from that trailer, right? So let's say it's a minute-long trailer. Let's say there's 30 cuts in there. So we're going to end up with 31 or 30-ish total video files in there. What we're going to do is from there, we're going to build a database. And a database is going to allow us to start to track all the different materials we're going to track over the next part of the class. Excuse me. So this week, we're just going to make our videos. Next week, we're going to start analyzing them. So next week, we're going to say, how long is this clip? What are the dimensions of this clip? What are the colors that are used in this clip? That sort of thing. So we're going to need to start to build a database that says this video clip is at this dimension, this length of time, and it uses these colors. So we're going to need to build a database in order to do that. Now, if you're working at a commercial film studio, they probably have tools for managing databases of video that are GUIs, other things, maybe built on a whole database system, that is managed by a back-end developer, that sort of thing. And I'm sure some of you here are programmers and actually know how to do that work. I'm going to be as cheap as possible in this class, and we're going to make what's called a JSON document. So that JSON document will basically be a text file that says, this is the name of the video file, this is the duration of that video clip, this is the dimension of that video clip, and here is where, some additional information about that video clip. So that's what we'll do in this class. So this week we will basically convert a video into a video data set, and then we'll make a database file of that video using JSON. So there will be a couple different tutorials here. We'll look at how to actually do the shot detection. Then we'll look at actually turning that into a JSON file. And lastly, we'll play a little bit with doing some random assignment of reshuffling those pieces. JSON is just a text format. Again, you don't really need to worry about this because we're actually just going to build it ourselves and we'll look at one. But no one really reads those manually. It's always about being in code. So the tools that we'll give you will basically allow you to write a JSON file, to open a JSON file and edit a JSON file, and then use that JSON file for later services. So when you upload, if you choose to upload that video data set to the class data set, what I'll have you do is upload both the videos, a folder of those videos, and the JSON file associated with them to the class data set. Because realistically, we need both. We need both the videos and the JSON file in order to do all the operations we're going to do over the next 7 weeks. So all that will be covered in the tutorials, but just know that like the end outcome for this course or this week will basically be to build a video data set. So here is what we're going to cover this week. So I will link to that ethics video. Again, that's probably more optional just if you're interested in sort of like how I think about copyright and ethics. I'll cover a little bit of Colab. I know a lot of folks in here have already used Colab in my previous classes. Those folks can probably skip over this, but for those of you that are new to this, I'll cover Colab. PyScene Detect and DaVinci Resolve, you can probably pick one of those depending on your preference. Although I would recommend people use PyScene Detect just to get used to and comfortable with Colab. Then we'll look at how to turn those into JSON files, and then we will do a random sequencing of shots. This is sort of like that Lev Manovich piece I showed, which actually will be able to take our, let's say we did a film trailer, we've got 30 clips, we can resequence those however we want. And we'll actually use some randomization, some random seeds that allow us to control that so we could recreate it, or it could create endless iterations of these videos. And that's pretty fascinating. So we'll do a little bit of that just so people have something to share in the Slack channel at the end of the week. So your homework is to create a small video data set. I would recommend starting small. So again, recommend go grab a trailer, go grab a 5 to 10 minute video clip or whatever, and break that into clips. If you are really excited about this and you want to start doing whole feature-length films, feel free. Just know that the longer your video clips are or the more video you have, the larger your files are. So if you're going to go and be like, I'm going to go find 100 Kung Fu films, turn them all into clips, you're going to need a big Google Drive space for that. And if you want to do that and share that with me, it's on my NYU account and I've got unlimited space, so you're more than welcome to drop that for me. But that will take time. It'll take time to process that. I think when I did a film for this demo, I think it took about an hour to do a clips for like a 2-hour movie. So it takes time, but it works. It's faster than doing it manually. So just think about that. And then the thing I would love for people to share is like experiment with recombining the clips randomly. So either manually randomly, like dropping them into QuickTime one by one, or using the tool that we're going to look at for that demo, which we'll use FFmpeg under the hood, and will allow it to like sort of do some randomization. The reason I like the randomization as a technique or as an example is whenever I've done that and then shown people the clip I made, but not told them it was random, they're always like, "Oh, you put those two pieces together for a reason, right? Like you really wanted to put that actor and that actor next to each other." And I was like, I didn't do that on purpose at all. But humans tend to find connections that maybe aren't always there. Or it helps you sort of see like, oh, there's something interesting going on in this particular film in the way that these shots are set up, right? And this sort of starts to help you see patterns. And patterns are a big part of what we're going to do in this class. We're basically going to find patterns and then expose them in different ways. So this will help get us started a little bit with that and start to see how stuff might come together. So that's your homework for the week. Again, go through these tutorials. I recognize this week is probably going to be the most, like we're probably going to hit like 3 hours of material. I apologize. Just to get us set up. Again, some of this stuff is basic that some people probably already know. For some of you, this might be a lot just because you're just getting used to these tools and just getting situated. So this week might be the most intense week, but I promise going forward, going to keep it to about 2 hours, and there should be enough material to keep people interested without overwhelming them. All right, so that's it for this lecture. Again, go check out those tutorials that are linked to from the syllabus, and I'll see you around Slack this week. Thanks.